Recorded Books presents Firewall, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, by James Swallow, narrated by Natalie Naudus. Author's note. Firewall takes place in 2015, 2 years after the events depicted in Splinter Cell Blacklist, and 4 years prior to the Operation Watchman mission in Bolivia, seen in Ghost Recon Wildlands. 1. Gunter Fabrik, Kreuzberg, Berlin. It took 4 days for them to narrow the search. 4 cold days on the streets of a stone-gray city where the spring seemed unable to take hold, the season still warring with the last overcast remains of a winter unwilling to give ground. They got close to the target on the second night, tracking a handoff in the U-Bahn at Alexanderplatz, but a wild scramble that saw them changing trains and sprinting down rain-slick platforms netted nothing but irritation. Their quarry, designated with the codename Treble, avoided the team with an ease that bordered on insulting. Later, Lynx had earned hard looks when she suggested that the target had deliberately drawn them in to get the measure of the operatives sent to capture him. Her companions reacted predictably. Gator, the stocky, corn-fed ex-ranger, took it as a personal failure on his part and spent hours staring into his coffee and squaring away his kit to hide his frustrations. Buzzard, the wiry New Yorker forever pent up with nervous energy, played with his knife and pored over a map of the city. Neither man seemed to sleep that much, both always awake when Lynx rose each morning in their dingy safe house off Karl Marx Strasse. She wasn't like them. Of average build with dark brown shoulder-length hair, she could have blended into any crowd of tourists without making a ripple. But if you gave her a second look, meeting those sharp green eyes, you might have sensed something of the hard focus she kept hidden. The others had been career military before their recruitment, although Buzzard was circumspect about what branch. Lynx guessed Navy, but he wouldn't confirm or deny, and when he posed the question to her, she was equally tight-lipped. Gator decided she was former police, and she allowed him to believe that. The truth was more complex. The secrecy, even from each other, was part of the program. Sometimes active missions meant working with people you knew next to nothing about, finding a way to mesh together into an operable unit at short notice. Hence the code names and the lack of personal small talk. The people in charge wanted this op to be about the takedown, not a team-building exercise for agents in the field. Lynx was fine with that. Having seen Gator and Buzzard out in the world over the past few days, she had no doubts that either man had the right mindset for collaboration. Still, they managed to track Treble to his staging area, a victory of sorts. Lynx studied the derelict building across the street through the windshield of their rented VW Golf, the brutalist 5-story block of concrete and graffiti-covered glass rising behind a corrugated metal fence. Against a whirl of fine rain falling from a low-night sky, the place had an unlovely look to it, the typical silhouette of utilitarian East German architecture. The sign over the entrance was still visible, despite decades of decay. The place had been a textile factory, turning out sports kits for kids playing soccer inside the Deutsche Demokratische Republik, but that had been before the fall of the Berlin Wall and Die Wende, what the Germans called the turning point. Lynx looked around, checking her sector for traffic, finding nothing. This whole area on the bank of the River Spree had been just inside the wall in the bad old days of the Cold War, and you could see the legacy of it in the buildings. Like a lot of Berlin's riverside real estate, the fate of the factory would be to get gobbled up by some property developer, then razed to the ground so some new modernist construction could rise in its place. Or maybe they would keep the exterior intact, playing on its communist-era retro chic. She wondered what the DDR stalwarts of the past would make of that. For her, those people and that time were ancient history. Something that only existed in movies and documentaries. No visual, drawled Gator, down low in the passenger seat with a pair of low-light goggles held to his face. He peered at the factory's lightless windows. Treble could be masking his signature, He's smart, offered Buzzard, leaning forward in the VW's backseat. He carefully screwed a long sound suppressor into the barrel of a Glock 17 pistol before loading it with a magazine of blue-tipped bullets.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.